against the status quo. And it takes, like, we are, I consider, like, sexism like the sea we swim in, so you can't really even recognize it. And it's, and we've had such a strong narrative, and there's some backlashes, too. Like, every time there has been advances made to get past sexism and misogyny, like, there tends to be a pretty big backlash as well. And then people, I think, just, they just don't, like, it's just hard for people to recognize because we grow up in it. And so one of the ways that we have to get past the sexism is we all have to examine, like, how we've internalized it. And this includes, like, I've had to, like, I know that as growing up, I internalized ideas that were sexist and misogynist. Just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I don't internalize those ideas. And so we have to examine all of those things. And then you have to actively work against it. Like, it's not, it's the same thing with racism. Like, you can not individually participate in racist acts or sexist acts, but that doesn't mean that it goes away. Like, it's still there. It's what you have to actively work against it. You have to actively dismantle these systems that we have set up that are sexist and racist, and that's how we get past it. Like, it's not going to sort of go away. Like, it wasn't created passively. Like, there were definitely lots of laws and rules and regulations and cultural norms that contributed to the sexism we have, and they were created, and so they're not just going to kind of go away on their own. Like, they have to actually be dismantled. Like, we have to look at why we're not paying women equally. Like, we're not paying the women on the soccer team equally. Like, what contributes to that? And so we have to examine those things and not just fall back into the easy excuses, which is what I've heard some people explain. Well, it's not as easy as you think. So I'm like, well, I don't know why it isn't. Like, they produce a certain amount of revenue. They are doing, all kinds of things. They're being very successful. They're excelling. Why is it that they are paid so much less? And so I think we can talk to really examine, like, not just what's going on, but, like, what also is in ourselves, and then how that contributes to the wider thing. Like, it's not going to be solved by individuals. It's going to be something that we solve by dismantling these sexist and racist systems that are set up.
And I think part of it is also we have to find ways that people even in the industries that are causing the problems address those issues and take on those issues. Like I said, I've got friends that are in both TV. Of course, I do the radio and stuff, but I've got friends that are in TV, including creating TV programs. And sometimes that can be some of the most sexist items out there, some of the images that we allow to be put out there, whether it's in TV, whether it's in music, whether it's in the different other forms. And even I would argue, and I was wondering if you would think the same thing. I know that on this show we've talked about black media and how sometimes black media can be just as guilty of sharing the racism narrative as the mainstream media, meaning that they'll highlight the crime and the elements almost as much as the mainstream media will, and not necessarily highlight some of the positives that are also in the black community. I'm thinking the same thing could be held. I don't know a lot of them, but I know there are some here in the Durham area. I'm thinking the same thing might even be argued for some of the women's magazines, that they don't necessarily highlight the positive images as strongly as they could, and that they sometimes fall into the narrative of presenting the same narrative as the mainstream media, if you want to look at women's media as well.
And for sure, and I think, like I said, we all sort of grow up in this racist, sexist culture, and so we absorb all these ideas, and we have a culture that rewards people for propping up the status quo. Like, it's, so if you've got maybe like a women's magazine that is, reinforcing the idea that, women's main role is to be supportive to their husbands and to be mothers, as opposed to also, doing other things that we understand that, men can do. They can be fathers, and they can also have well-rounded interests and be other things. And so, but you'll see, like, we're rewarded. Our system, our society rewards people for supporting the status quo. So it may be easier to get your magazine off the ground if you're not, like, really pushing any ideas that are too radical, or if you're, getting the script or screenplay produced. Like, it may just be, there's just be more opportunities because you are pushing something that is familiar, that people feel comfortable with, that's not going to make people feel uncomfortable. So you definitely, and we absorb all that stuff. So it's just part of what we have to unlearn.
Yeah, and it's across the board, because it seems to me like even, and I'm probably going to stick my foot in my mouth to even mention this industry and everything, but in terms of even knowing about it, but even if you like look at industries that are definitely very much anti-women to some degree. I'm thinking about like the whole porn strip industry and things of that nature. There was a push, I want to say in the 90s and 2000s, where there were like these people that were basically advertising themselves as being a feminist version of those fields. And I'm thinking to myself, is that even possible? Can you really be a star of an industry that is actually against women and claim that you're a feminist at the same time?
Well, I mean, one of the things, it's always tricky. Like, I don't ever want to police, like, if people call themselves feminists, you know, there's a lot of ways, there's lots of different types of feminisms. And so I do think that I think one of the things you want to look at is, like, is what is happening, like, in the industry, what it's producing, is it in itself, like, inequitable and sexist, or is it just exploiting people, and then, you know, as part of, like, the exploitation of capitalism, if it's doing that then and being harmful, like, I think there are ways for folks to be very empowered by what they do, and with also an eye too that what they're doing is impacting other people, and so they want to make sure that they aren't putting out things that are just reinforcing harmful stereotypes or harmful tropes or harmful narratives. So I think part of, you see, because I see that too with people who feel like maybe, you know, and I'm talking like there's so many different kinds of religions out there, and some people will feel like, well, maybe their religion, because they've got some people very vocal who are saying these sexist things, and that doesn't represent them. And so some of them is like wanting to sort of take back what they feel is positive from any of these, like, industries or any of these types of communities or groupings, and reclaim that, and then put out like this more empowering version. Because I think some of it is like looking at its core or at its root, are any of these things like really harmful? Is it just that they're part of a system that exploits people on a regular basis, and then that's what's making them harmful, as opposed to you know, to like how they're being presented. So I think that a lot of people, I don't ever like to sort of police how people, if they identify as feminists or not, people have their reasons for either wanting to or not identify that way. And some people who clearly do things that are very much about empowering women feel like the word feminism is too loaded, so that they don't want to use it. Particularly women of color, maybe some might feel like that as well. So the term itself, you know, I think it's more like looking at what people are doing, how they're acting, like, are they really being empowering, you know, true to themselves, and then empowering other people along the way.
Definitely. Now, I've only got a few more minutes, but I want people to find out how to get in touch with you to help continue your battle and everything, and our battle, because definitely a battle that I think needs to be won and everything. But one of the articles that was on the NC Policy Watch that you had written back in February was about demystifying abortion and how myths and stigma actually feed into the attack on Roe versus Wade. So I was just wondering if, in a short amount of time, I don't have a lot of time, but in a short amount of time, if you could explain what you meant by that.
Well, I mean, like I said, you know, the silence around abortion is what lets these narratives that are often untrue and often very disparaging, and that make people feel like, you know, like those narratives will flourish when people are not talking about like their own experiences with abortion. Because like I said, when you talk about it, like, there's a lot of common experiences, like every situation is different, but a lot of times people can relate over common experiences. But when you keep folks silent, and when you tell them that they're wrong or they should be ashamed, they will stay silent. And then so you aren't able to have these conversations, and also you aren't able to, like, you know, when the National Network of Abortion Funds is a national partner, and they have a saying that says everybody loves somebody who's had an abortion, which is true. Like, you may not know that somebody in life has had an abortion, somebody that you care about, because they're afraid to talk about it or they're afraid to tell you about it, but they have. And so, like, we all know people who've been in these situations, and so we can't really paint all these people with the same brush, because they've had these experiences, and we know them, and we need to know their stories. And so the silence is definitely a tactic used to then be able to create this false narrative around abortion. And that's what leads to, you know, people then pressing restrictions.
And just real quickly, another real quick comment, because I still just have a few more minutes and everything. How have we managed, and I was just wondering your assessment of this, but it seems to me that this particular person that sits in the office up there in D.C., we don't like to say his name, has got to be one of the most sexist people that we've ever had in office. So, I mean, I know there have been others that had some sexism ways. I'm thinking about, like, Mr. Kennedy and definitely some others. Some people would even argue Mr. Reagan, and definitely some others that probably had some sexist ways. But this seems to be like the ultimate, like, slap in the face to feminism, just his getting elected. Because, I mean, this is a man that actually did some very sexist things, even as a young man and a young business person. We won't even talk about what he did on The Apprentice and the pageants and other stuff, but it seems like I have a track record.
Well, I mean, it definitely, I think, like you said, like it's certainly, it's not like he's the only like sexist or misogynist president. He seems to be the most unrepentant one we've had, or at least the one who most wants it so much. But yeah, there's been multiple accusations of sexual assault that women have come forward to talk to him about. Like, he definitely speaks very disparagingly about women. He uses a lot of sexist and misogynistic language. And I think that's all sort of part of the backlash that you will see whenever there are gains being made around gender equality. Like, there's a really strong backlash. And so that's, he's just representing that backlash, I think, you know, in ways that people, I think even folks who maybe didn't want to believe that we lived in a sexist society were like kind of surprised that enough people were okay with electing this person or voting for this person, despite like things that even if they maybe considered themselves conservative voters, probably some people still felt very uncomfortable with how he talked about women and all the accusations against him. And so I think you definitely saw, I think, a lot of women in particular being politicized after the 2016 election in ways that they hadn't been before. And I think that was just like seeing somebody who was so blatantly misogynistic, didn't even try to hide it. In fact, seemed to think it was like a virtue. You know, like I think maybe shook some people out of kind of the complacency of like, oh, we've all moved past that. It's not the 1950s. It's like, well, there's a lot of unresolved stuff. And I think so that is being represented right now. And also, like, he appoints people who have very misogynistic views about women and about women's bodily autonomy. And so that's just being spread. And, you know, it's being just spread all through the administration.
Yes, definitely. Now, if folks wanted to reach out to help you on these very important issues and to just learn about what is going on with NC NORAL and everything, what are the ways that people can reach out to you and reach out to contacting you if they've got things that they want y'all's or the organization's help with, or if they just want to reach out to help you in the struggle?
Well, for sure, we have, you know, you can always go to our website. It's prochoicenc.org. And we have, you know, certainly we've got like a email listserv that folks can join up. We have a rapid response list where folks can sign up to, and that's where we just need people, particularly like when we need people to respond to something going on in the General Assembly. We can say, hey, we need y'all to show up or to be calling your lawmakers. We've got that list. And then we have social media of, you know, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter that folks can follow. And certainly on our website, it tells you how you can reach us if you want to talk to us about, like, doing something in your community or you have some questions or any of those kind of things. You can reach us that way. And certainly follow along with our social media because we try to keep people up to date on what's going on, particularly in North Carolina. We can always use people's support. Like, we believe that there's a grassroots movement around this, that we believe that most people really do feel like they support abortion access and they support access to the full reproductive, comprehensive reproductive health options. And so we just need you all to join up with us and show publicly that there is that support. And so I think that that's one of the things that is needed. It's sort of like a very quiet support right now. We just want folks to know that there are actually most people do support this.
Definitely. We definitely appreciate you being on the show, and hopefully folks will have learned a lot about what's going on and just what's happening and what the NC NORAL is involved with right now, as well as some of the other guests that we've had and everything. So definitely, Tara, I was glad that you were able to get in on the show because, like I said to you a couple of times, I definitely knew that you were involved in a very important battle that we definitely need to have a victory in and everything. So I'm glad to be able to get you on this